Can you imagine that very first Hanukkah, that very first time? Do you know the story? Do you know the story of Judas Maccabeus, Judah the Hammer, and his brothers who were rebelling against the Greeks? And they walked into the temple that the Greeks had desecrated. And they cleaned it up. They rededicated the temple. Hanukkah means rededication. And the last act was to light the eternal flame, to light the lamp. And there was only enough oil for one day, but it was going to take 8 days to get more oil and bring it back. But they lit it anyway. They performed this act of faith. And the lamp stayed lit for 8 days until the oil arrived. But can you imagine walking into that holy space and finding it desecrated and seeing all this work yet to be done? Can you imagine? It seems very 2020, doesn't it? Now, one could hardly blame them if they just thrown up their hands and said, oh, I'm out. Too much. I just can't. And maybe you've had those moments this year. Too much. I can't. Maybe you've had those moments inside where you've said, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But then you do it anyway. I call those moments Hanukkah moments. When we spin the dreidel, we say, Nes Gadol Hayasham, that's what the letters on the dreidel stand for. A great miracle happened there. Unless you're there. In Israel, one of the letters is changed. It's Nes Gadol Hayapo. A great miracle happened here, but we're not there. We're here, so we're there. Am I confusing you? We say a great miracle happened there. When I'm in the midst of work that seems like, how am I ever going to get this done? School is a lot like that for me. How am I going to get all these papers written? How am I going to get all these assignments done? Well, for me, it's like Hanukkah. It seems like an impossible task, and then a great miracle happens. The great miracle, though, the great miracle is really our perseverance, our willingness to accept that something needs to change within, that we must find something and move on somehow. So we bring our broken hallelujahs. As a community, we begin again, and from the pieces we will build something new. There is work that only you can do. We wait for you. And some of that work is exhausting work. Now, when we're together in person and we do that work together, we can see one another. We're there with one another. And it doesn't feel so much like we're doing the work alone. While we're separated, while we're not physically together, it can feel more like I'm in this by myself, and yet we're not. There are others doing the work with us. So what is the work that we're doing? Well, many things. Many things. Perhaps perhaps you've been involved with UU the Vote. If you've done anything at all with UU the Vote, I'm going to invite you to raise your hand in the participants list to go ahead and I spent a Sunday making phone calls in Georgia, and I see hands going up, blue hands going up all over. Look at that. If you look at the participants, look at how many people participated in UU the Vote. And that seems like a solitary thing. If you've done any phone calling or writing postcards, you know, that seems like you're doing it by yourself. If you've done those phone banks, boy, it's just one phone call after another. Or writing postcards, it's one postcard after another. But look at how many people have done that work here. You can put your hands down now. You have to go in and click on them. Or maybe way back in March and April, in the early times, maybe you were making masks. Maybe some of you made masks. Nancy Weston's telling us that there were up to 27 of us involved in UU the Vote. That's fabulous. Maybe you made masks. Maybe you've been volunteering on work in our congregation. We have people who've been involved in our building use task force, and now folks who are on a task force looking for rental space, where we're going to and what we're going to do next and where we're going to go. And folks doing all kinds of prep work to help us figure out what's next. And folks who are serving on the board and on the finance committee and in many other capacities, on the membership committee, and all sorts of teams and committees to keep us rolling. And then we're doing that from our own individual spaces. It's work that we're doing together and for our community. Maybe you're involved in another community organization and there's work that you're doing. So while it can seem solitary, we put it all together and so much happens because of it. So much happens because of it. The work we do in our own congregation, some of that is specific to our congregation, but some of that work we pool with other UUs around the country and with other faith communities in our own area, and we leverage that to make big things happen. And look at the results. Look at the results. The voter turnout this year was huge. And that was a result of people working at home to get people to go to the polls physically or to mail in their ballots. And if you had any part of that, good on you. But what changed? What changed? Is this work exhausting? Can you imagine walking into that temple and looking at all of the things that had to be done? It must have been exhausting. Have you ever walked into your house and just, if you haven't done anything in a while, or if you have pets and they got into something, or small children and they got into something, or you just haven't picked up in a while, and you look at the whole thing and you go, oh. But you have to start somewhere. And those Maccabees, they did it. It was exhausting work. And the thing about the Maccabee means hammer. So he's Judah Maccabee, Judah the hammer. But I love to think of him just like with a rag and soap and water cleaning up. I mean, what good is a hammer in that moment? He's Judah the hammer, but he's cleaning. They were cleaning. Sometimes Sometimes we just have to get down and dirty and do that work. All the fierceness in the world isn't going to change what has to be done. What changes us is the task ahead. We have to change that mindset. Well, this is what I have to do. So what changed? Well, they saw what needed to be done in the temple. Now, this was the second temple. It had already been destroyed once. This was the second temple. Things had changed before and things would change after. What would change? Well, with each experience, we can grow and learn. We have that opportunity. The story became folded in. Became part of our celebrations. We took that on and carried it with us. I'm talking about we, this is my Jewish self talking. And folded that into our faith. As a way to say, here is God being with us. How will we also be faithful? How will we rededicate ourselves? How will we learn from this? So I'm going to ask you today, how will you rededicate yourself? How will we rededicate ourselves? What lesson can we learn from this? This is also a time of great upheaval. Politically, socially, we can't unsee the things we've learned in the last year. We've learned so much about how we need to do better at making justice in the world. About how we need to take better care of one another. Of our overall health, the health of our community. We've learned about things that we probably can't take for granted. What will you rededicate yourself to? What shall we rededicate ourselves to in our community? The Maccabees probably had some broken hallelujahs, and yet they went into the temple and they rededicated themselves anyway. And they continued to celebrate. We don't have to be perfect in order to start again. What will you take with you from this year? These toilet paper rolls, they're not empty. They're full of possibilities. What will you take from 2020? How will it change you for the better? I will rededicate myself to you once again. Where you go, I will go, beloved. I will rededicate myself to your journey. I will take what I have learned about how we can be a religious community that's almost exclusively online and apply that to our future together in whatever form we take. How about you? Chag Chanukah Sameach. Happy Chanukah.